Hello, and welcome to the BYU Family History Library webinar series. We are glad you could join us today. I'm Bryant, and I'll be your host for this webinar. Please make sure your microphones and web cameras are disabled during the presentation to provide a smooth webinar. During the webinar, if you have technical difficulties, please use the chat box and I can address your concerns. You're welcome to use the chat box during the webinar for comments and insights. However, all questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Our upcoming webinar is on January 31st, Friday at 4 p.m., and that will be on immigration and naturalization with Susan Hoffman. We are also working on our February webinar schedule as well, so we'll get that out to you as soon as we finish. If you'd like to access a previous webinar, please visit our webinar index on our website or search on our YouTube channel. All of our webinars are recorded and uploaded the following Monday for your convenience. We also post links to recordings and other updates on our Facebook and Twitter accounts. For today's webinar, we are pleased to hear from Dr. Roger Minert. Dr. Roger P. Minert received his doctoral degree from The Ohio State University in German language history and a second language acquisition theory. He taught German language and history for 10 years and then became a professional family history researcher. Accredited by the Family History Library for research in Germany and Austria, he worked for 12 years as a private genealogical researcher. From 2003 to 2019, he served as a professor of family history at Brigham Young University. The author of 167 publications, he directs the research program German Immigrants in American Church Records. The series now consists of 28 volumes. In 2019, Minert was recognized for his years of service to the Palatines to America Society, and also received the Shirley Reamer Lifetime Achievement Award from the International German Genealogy Partnership. If Dr. Minert is ready now, we'll turn the time over to him.
Schönen guten Tag. Good afternoon. I'm very pleased to join with you for this short or long distance webinar. Some of you would probably not be able to come to one of the many conferences I talk to, so you can access my ideas and sentiments this way. GIACR is what we call German Immigrants in American Church Records. We like to have these short terms to use long ones. One of my favorite topics because I deal with this several hours every day now. Even as a retired person, this will go on for a very long time. This set of books, now 28 volumes strong, with 210,000 plus German immigrants, is acclaimed across the United States among Germanic researchers. Some of you probably know about this. Some of you have probably seen these books before. Some people consider this the best innovation in German genealogy in the United States in many decades. And if that's really true, we need to know the background of this. The question is, how do these books emerge? How do they come into being? What are the sources? Who does the work? I'd like to explain that to you in the next few minutes, such that you gain an impression as to whether you can rely on these books. Are these veritable? Are these reliable? Can you have confidence in the information you find in these books? I believe I can offer you that in the next few minutes with some ideas about the origins. Back in 2003, when I was working in the Family History Library every day as a private researcher, I used to call myself self-unemployed just for fun, but I always had enough work to do. I wrote a number of books, and Brigham Young University became aware of those, offered me then a professorship in family history with a specialty in Germanic work. So there I'm sitting, wondering, at the Family History Library, months before I started, I'm going to be taking a paleography course. Now, paleography means deciphering old handwriting. So I'll be teaching students how to look at old records and determine the language, what's the content, what's the exact translation of these. And I could do the same thing most people do, which is produce the same documents year after year, translate this, transliterate that. But that wouldn't be any contribution to the field in general. So I thought, can I come up with something where we can produce a product that we can share with all German researchers. That's a bold idea, but think of the wonderful contribution that could be. So I was reading the church records on microfilm, St. John's Lutheran Church, little tiny town just across the border from Cincinnati into Indiana. The first 53 pages, I'm putting together a pedigree chart for a client, as I've done many times with church records. Each father and each mother has a date of birth and a place of birth in Germany. This is something I'm thinking, gosh, the census doesn't give that. County marriage records almost never give that. Immigration records almost never give that. In fact, when we're trying to find the actual hometown of a German, Austrian, or Swiss immigrant in the U.S. records, we're hard-pressed. We hardly ever get those. But I knew from my experience already, I've been working at this for 10 years every day, that church records have that kind of information. Why is it that so many people don't know about church records? Why do we forget that our Christian ancestors went to churches, had their children baptized, they were married there, or married by priests, reverends, ministers somewhere else? So, and in many cases when people say, well, yes, I found them in a church in Missouri, but I can't read the records, they're in German. We have an answer to that. This is the record I was looking at. You may be thinking, yipes, this is scary. Well, it can be. But once you learn how to read this, and some of you listening today and watching can read this, there's Heinrich August Rolf from Markendorf in the parish of Buer in the province of Hanover with his birth date. And according to this, he also has a wife, Marie Elisabeth Stegemüller from Bullston, and she's from a town very, very close by. 53 pages in a row with this. This is absolute heaven to a researcher. So I'm thinking we've got to figure out a way to use my students in this paleography class to read records like that, put them out where the public can see them and gain from our expertise. I decided right off the bat I would specialize with Protestant records, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes in more detail. But there are plenty of Protestant records out there to work with. This is an example of what you might find in a typical Lutheran church that served German immigrants back in, for the most part, the 19th century. As most of you know, by 1900, 1910, 1920, the language in most of these churches had gone from German to English, which is a natural progression. So, but here's a baptismal entry. A child born here, I think this is this is Kentucky apparently. So the parents have their birthplaces here. Now the child is not of interest to my team because this child is not an immigrant, but the parents certainly are, mother and father. About 20% of the time a record will have that. Confirmation records can be wonderful as well. Sometimes nothing more than Johann Heinrich Friedrich Dittmer is confirmed at the age of 14. But in this case, as with all of his fellow teenagers in this Missouri church, we have the exact date of birth, the hometown. This is Hessstedt in the county of Salzwedel, happens to be in the province of Sachsen, and both parents. So this is a marvelous discovery. Marriage entries, this one is a bit of a sparse one, but still we have the bride and groom, each with their hometowns or home counties, in this case, both from Westphalia. So right there, if this is the only thing you can find, you know where to go. He was born in Hille, she's born in Dielingen. And by whatever means you gain access to the church records in those two towns, you will find those two people. Now, their birth dates are not given here, but you can estimate with good demographics from genealogists that if they're married in 1875, he's born in about 1845 to 50, she's born in 50 to 55, and you will find them in those towns. Now, keep in mind that without these towns, we cannot jump the Atlantic Ocean back to Germany and establish that the people in Minnesota were actually from these towns. And without that, you can't build a family tree going many, many years back. Here's a death entry written in, you recognize maybe the Fraktur alphabet, the typeset pre-printed pages. And according to this lady here, Marie Loiser, etc., was born by the way, that's her married name. She was born under the maiden name of Hahn from Offenbach, which is in Hessen. And here are her death and burial dates. And you can calculate her birth date over here to the side using the age of death, 44 years, 1 month, 10 days. So this is wonderful stuff. It all comes down to the hometown. Now, let me remind you that my own pain and suffering went for part of 34 years as I helped my parents find the hometown. They began when I was a little boy, and I was in graduate school at The Ohio State University when we found the hometown after 34 years. You can imagine how thrilling it would have been for us to find that hometown in 34 minutes, looking in a book under the title German Immigrants in American Church Records. So now, defining the challenge. Remember, I haven't come to BYU yet, but I'm teaching that in the fall of '03. What do I have to do? Can my paleography students, these are 20, 22, 24-year-olds, learn the handwriting well enough to extract correctly the information out of the records? Here's one of our students sitting at a microfilm reader, and he's using Myers Gazetteer. What would I have to teach them and how well for them to do this? That comes back to me. Is it a fair expectation that in a matter of 13 weeks, they could achieve that status of being capable to contribute to this kind of program? And if we even did that, establish great procedures, access good records, and compile a bunch of stuff, would anybody want to publish it? Now you're thinking Brigham Young University is a bona fide publisher parish institution. It's a research university. So, but I had enough enough irons in the fire that I wasn't worried about getting a book published here or nothing at all, or not staying at BYU. Program design. Select states with German populations. Use Protestant churches only. Gain access to records. Design entry format. How are we going to present this data? Assign students. And then somebody has got to check this stuff and do the editing, make sure that what they produce is in fact true. Sorry, we got these out of order. And then collect specific data before checking it. And then organize it into books. Bit by bit, what states? Now, many of you know that the Midwest states are chock full of Germans. And there are two main reasons for this. I'll tell you about that in a second. So it would be logical to start there. Anybody who does German research wouldn't start in New Mexico, wouldn't start in Alabama. Those are places where very few Germans lived. I chose Indiana for the following reason. It's a great central location. If you consider the main immigration routes, people are pouring into the ports of the East Coast. They'll get on the National Road and head through Ohio right into Indianapolis. They will come across the northern states closer to Philadelphia and New York. They'll come across those states along Lake Michigan towards Chicago, and they have to go through Indiana to get there. And especially before the American Civil War, we had many thousands of Germans shipping into New Orleans. They took the Mississippi River up. If you go just north of St. Louis, you can turn left and continue up the Mississippi to Iowa, to Wisconsin, Minnesota, or you can turn right at Cairo, Illinois, and follow the Ohio River with Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio to your left, and Kentucky to your right. So in the middle is Indiana. Now, the Family History Library catalog is loaded with wonderful microfilm information regarding churches all over the United States, all over the world, and to this date is still the finest repository for family history research. Well, I took this state apart, Indiana, putting town name by town name by town name, and townships and counties on all jurisdictional levels, trying to locate what looked like good Protestant churches. I found a bunch, some of the names are giveaways. St. John, St. Martin, St. Matthew are giveaways. Anything with Jerusalem, Trinity, Evangelical, Bethany, those are also giveaways for German Protestant churches. Now, Ancestry never had any of these records back in those days as in digital form, but over the years, especially in the last 5 years, they've begun to collect some of those. So we now have two, well, nothing close to the size of the collection in the Family History Library, but Ancestry is coming on. Two very important archives contributed things. I have some great friends at the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod office in St. Louis. and across town, Eden Theological Seminary. Both of those were very good to allow family search, back in those days, Genealogical Society, to microfilm their records. But more importantly, I had to go to them to ask permission to extract information from the records and publish those. In other words, we have copyright issues we've got to worry about as well. And then, fortuitously, I hooked in with the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, an organization with hundreds and, well, several thousands of Lutheran churches affiliated with them, working under their standards. And many of those churches over the years, unfortunately, have become defunct. Their records are automatically sent off to Elk Grove Village. That's under the landing patterns of the Chicago airport there, just outside the Windy City. They've been super good to help me and have allowed me to use anything I want, copy anything I want, and extract what I want from those records. Now, we also started by writing to churches in Indiana. When we found out that there was a St. John's Lutheran Church in Indianapolis, we wrote there because we had no access to any microfilmed or digitized images. But that cost a lot of money, took a lot of time, and almost never yielded anything. So we basically gave up that strategy. It's all part of discovery, of course. Now, why would I pick Protestant churches only? Well, as I indicated, I'd already been doing daily family history research. I had 35,000 hours of experience there in the Family History Library and traveling in Europe to archives. And I knew that Catholic records almost never give the hometowns of ancestors. First of all, Catholics in many cases joined with other ethnic groups when they came to America. They went into churches with Irish, with French Catholics. Obviously, in cases like that, the pastor can't write in German. But it may not surprise you to know that in most cases there, the pastors were writing in, I should say the priests were writing in Latin. And to this day, I've never found a Catholic church where it says the groom comes from the town of X in Germany and the bride from the town of Y in Germany. Now, I know those exist somewhere, and if you happen to know about those, by the way, send me a note, because someday we will do Catholics. Now, on the Protestant side, Lutheran, Reformed Lutheran, Presbyterian. By the way, I was born and baptized Presbyterian at the age of 5 weeks. Methodist, Baptist, Church of the Brethren, even Mennonite. We'll take any variety, but most of the Methodists, of course, did not have German records, German language records, with German immigrants, but we do find German Methodist Church, German Baptist Church, German Presbyterian Church. And in many cases, we've found some great information for our books from those sources. Now, this is part of your education as a genealogist. You should be thinking at all times about your people, if they're Christians, going to church, whether they had faith or not. You can't know that for these people who are dead. You can get them to tell you that in an interview later on. So, gaining access to the records. Here's sweet Rachel, worked for me for 3 years, and she's got a whole drawer full of microfilms she's working with. Microfilms can be used without restriction. That's with permission, with the knowledge of the Family History Library. Missouri Synod, Eden Seminary said, yes, do it. ELCA said, yes, copy anything you want, take any information you want. And then as we wrote to people hoping they would write back and share us copies, but they basically said, we don't have the money, the time, the effort available to make copies to send them to you, or we object to what you're doing in the first place. So now these are all things that are related to copyright issues, because when I present a manuscript or a text to a printer, the printer has to be able to say that I have to indemnify the printer. I have to say, I promise you that you will not be sued for copyright infringement because of information I put in this book. Well, the genealogical data we need are, of course, name, date and place of birth, parents' names, date and place of marriage, date and place of death, year of immigration. This is the core information. Year of immigration is family history, not strictly genealogy. But 2 other items we have included over the years. We've included anything regarding military service, because that can lead us to more important records. So whether they served in the War of 1812, in the Napoleonic Wars in Germany, or in the American Civil War, we put that down. We record information on only one occupation. That is parish priest or church pastor, because those people are quite often involved in group migration. We don't put in professor, farmer, butcher, baker, candlestick maker. These are the 5 countries where German is still a or the native language. But think about these the way they used to be. Germany was enormous in the old days, far larger than it is today. So we use Germany from the borders of the German Empire. And that puts us in 1871 1918, the greatest extent Germany ever had. So these people in our book were not born in Poland. That territory was Germany at the time, and we name it the German names. It's quite incorrect to say, well, he died in 1924 in Missouri, but he was born in 1846 in Poland. No, he was born in Germany. This is what a record could look like. We bold the name of any immigrant so it shines brightly on the page. Born, place, and date. Son of this man and this woman. Marriage, place, and date. This obviously comes from a Richmond, Indiana church because we have both the marriage and the death there. Now, Angela Thiemann, whom he married, is also an immigrant, and the bolded feature here indicates that she has her own entry somewhere else in the book. This comes from a burial record, so she won't be right next to him, but if these were bride and groom, Gerhard Heinrich Minert would be followed immediately by Angela Thiemann. Their marriage place and date would match, but not their hometowns and birth dates. So I'm going to assign these to students in my paleography course, where they're learning how to read old German records. I put 2 students together, and I was allowed to use 6 hours of classroom time out, of time out of the class for 3 hours in class during the week. So that's the 1-to-2 ratio that is observed nationwide at universities. 1 hour in class, 2 hours out of class. I thought I'll use half of the time for this GIACR project, and the other 3 hours I'll use for European records, so they can see how things are done on both sides of the ocean. I put them together because I thought, well, if this is really daunting at the start, I don't know how they'll react to this. I don't want one student sitting there in tears at the microfilm reader thinking, I quit, I'm going to drop the course. So I put them together. And if we had German language, in this case, Channing Miller, who worked with me for 4 years, he had lived in Europe for 2 years and spoke German fluently, so we put a novice with him, and the 2 of them worked on the project together until later in the semester when they decided they could, in fact, do this alone, more convenient for their time. Now, I had to instruct them on how to use microfilm readers. None of them had ever put a microfilm on a reader. And of course, that's going to be a skill that we lose totally here in the next few years. But they had to be able to use gazetteers. Many of you in the German realm have used Meyer's Gazetteer, 1912-1913. That's the German Empire at its greatest extent. But we also use reverse alphabetical indexes. And if you don't know what these are, you need to know. We ought to do a webinar on those one of these days. Because when we can't read the first part of the word, we can start at the last letter, moving to the left toward the first, where all the names are reversed in their alphabetical presentation. Now, we had to have extraction standards. People had to know, now, do I put death in front of marriage? Do I do 3 letters for July or 4 letters? So I wrote those up and issued those. So every entry had to be checked. The students finished a Word document with their information. They sent it to me by email. I go through and compare that to the microfilm, or digital images nowadays more often, and determine how close are they to correct. Do they have pattern errors? I need to instruct them. If they're doing the same thing wrong, if they're constantly reading an R for a K as an uppercase letter, I need to tell them, watch for these indications, and next time you'll get the R and the K separated. So, and if they're forgetting certain other parts of, or forgetting to put in a pastor, if he's there, the word pastor, then I'll remind them of that. Here are 2 main points in the entire exercise. Never miss an immigrant. Now, you can understand how important that is, because if you're looking for an immigrant in Nebraska and he's in a church we've processed and we missed him, and you find him later on, how disappointed would you be in us? That would shake your confidence in our ability to achieve the goals I've put out here. And those are ambitious goals. Some people at the beginning of this would have probably said, forget it, Professor Minert, this isn't going to work. Come up with something else for your paleography students to do. Number 2, spell the name of the hometown correctly. Why is this important? Well, you can imagine, if we took it exactly the way the Illinois pastor wrote it, back there in Peoria, Illinois, back in 1870. If you misspelled it and we put that into our book, you can't find it in a map and you can't find it in a gazetteer. So now the question you might be asking is, how often do you have to change that? Well, I met with my team last night, just coincidentally there, for a celebration of our newest book coming out and discussion of our technicalities there. And I said, I would tell my audience on Wednesday that about 30% of all place names are misspelled. And they nodded. And some of them said, well, more than that in the church I'm doing right now. In one infamous church in Toledo, we had up to 75% of all place names misspelled by the same pastor for more than 15 years, had us all in tears. So, but unless we can spell those correctly using all possible reference works, we're not going to help you much. So we organize these into books. Each church has its own masthead. And we use the name and location, by the way, of the church when it was established. Now you might be saying, but wait a second, the name has changed 2 or 3 times in the meantime. Well, it may have over the years. But we're going back to what it was when it was established in 1865, in 1838, in 1892, because that period of time will coincide with other kinds of records you're looking for, land records, county records, probate, things like that. Now we'll tell you where you got the information, because in the introduction we'll say, please go to the same microfilm and look at this yourself, because this is where you'll find more people. Now we'll do another webinar later on where we discuss how to use these books to the maximum effect to build your family tree. And of course, giving credit where credit is due, we put the names of the students in there, compilers, checkers. Now you can actually see on the front cover here, compilers, we've got about 25 of those named. That was the design in the first book for the title page, but by accident, the publisher made that the cover of the book. The students were, of course, not in objection to that. We sort all churches in the book alphabetically by town name. Now we have about 7,000 to 7,500 entries in the book, depending on the length of the entry. We size those according to the number of pages we think will be in a book, and then we make a map in each book showing the number of counties, which counties are treated in this book. This was a real challenge. This took 3 months to do, to find somebody who'd say, well, yes, this is a great project. Well, they all said this is a great project, but most of them said, we can't publish this and get our money back because the run would be too small. We'd have to run 5,000 of these to get our money back. We don't think we can sell 5,000. It's just too specific. And I understood that as well. But we eventually found somebody who said, we'll put these in digital format and sell them to people that way. We'll give you 4 cents an entry. Well, I went to the students just sort of laughingly and said they're offering us 4 cents. I nearly was thrown out of the room in indignation. One gal said, I'm spending 8 to 10 and 12 minutes per entry, and you want to sell that entry for 4 cents. So I went back and very politely declined. But Lou Rohrbach came out of nowhere with Picton Press. He actually did New England stuff, but I said, what about this? He said, well, Indiana's too far out of my region, but I love your project. I'm going to bet on this. I'll publish that book for you. Well, in Lou Rohrbach's time, we produced 18 volumes before he passed away, and another publisher in the meantime, with the notoriety of his books, another publisher jumped in instantly, and that is Leland Meitzler of Family Roots Publishing up in Orting, Washington. He took this over instantly, and he'll publish everything I ever do for as long as I live. So here's the distribution currently. Number 1, Indiana, 2 through 5, all in Wisconsin. Then we go out to my parents' Nebraska German home state for number 6. Next door to Iowa, 7, 8, 9. Next door to Illinois, 10 to 14. Then we went up to Michigan, also very heavy with Germans, 15 to 17. We thought we'd get thousands and thousands of Germans in Minnesota, but our access to records was terrible, was really Spartan. So we tossed in North Dakota, South Dakota, made 18. Then down to Missouri, 7 volumes with a tremendously German-heavy state. Moving over into Ohio, we now had 26, 7, and 8 in northern Ohio. We're working on 29, 30, 31, 2, 3, and 4, all in Ohio. And I might as well let you know now, publicly, this is the first public announcement. After this, we're going into Kentucky. We're going to look especially at the Ohio River counties of Kentucky. I think there are 24 counties there, where we think that German immigrants got off the boats coming up the Ohio, instead of going left into Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, moved into Kentucky. We'll see what happens. We've done a lot of work investigating this already. My own involvement in GIACR over 16 years, starting with the first day I went into class, literally the first day. In the second week, my students were extracting data. 5% general management, 15% getting and copying records, instructing the students, 20%. By the way, not just students in that course, but students from the German department, students who came in who had lived in Germany and wanted more information, more training, students who were genealogists already. So evaluating records and assigning them, 10%. The big one, 40%, checking their work. 5% interface with designers, indexers, etc. 5% future when people write to me, when are you going to go to Pennsylvania? Are you going to do Texas? Well, in my 16 years, about 7,000 hours invested in this, and now I'm still working about 30 hours a week on this. Now, funding, students won't work for free. Sorry about that. As much as we'd like that, they simply can't donate 10 hours a week. So now it's free work in the 422 class because they cannot be paid for work they do in association with an academic class. But the second they get their grade in that course, I'm free to hire them. And fortunately, BYU was very good about giving me mentored student grants. My department, we were also very fortunate to find one kind family who kept us floating for several years. They simply gave me $10,000 for 7 years straight. But then they came around and said, Professor Minert, we're really sorry, but we need to take our money to Africa for a project. I said, by all means, go, and you'll be blessed for all the work you've done in helping us there. So, well, in the meantime, I've got to find some other way. BYU can no longer give me money, and people can't donate to BYU and get the tax benefits and have the money come to me. So we've established a 501c3 charitable entity under IRS regulation. We call it German Immigration Research. Now people can donate straight to my program, and at the end of the year, they receive a certificate saying this recognizes your donation. Thank you very much, and you present that to your tax professional or when you're doing your own taxes. So you can find that now under germanresearch.org. This was supposed to be launched today. I spoke this morning with the designer who said this will be up by the end of the day, and it better be. If not, then tomorrow. So if you've gained confidence, as I hope you have, that this is a reliable work with 28 volumes, 210,000 Germans, and national acclaim, this is something you need to know about. This is something you need to see and hopefully work with as you build family trees. So go to germanresearch.org and check that out. Germanimmigrants.org works as well, by the way. And if you like this, if you can't give us $10,000 today, I'll forgive you. But for $39 on my website, rogerpminert.com, we'll send you a flash drive that has 101 books and articles written by me in full text and bibliographic details on the 66 books that are still in the market that I can't give away. But more interestingly, in connection with this program today, that flash drive or digital download has the every name indexes of our last 10 GIACR volumes, 150,000 Germans. And that's yours for $39. All of that goes right into the program to pay students. So thanks for your kind support. Well, my goodbye comes in reference to this. Dr. Fritz Jungling, some of you probably know him, Family History Library, spoke to my students a couple of years ago, and he said, GIACR has changed the way we do German genealogical research in the Family History Library. You might say, wait a second, how do you do this? My guy went to Texas. GIACR hasn't done Texas. Well, look in the GIACR indexes. You might find the rare surname if he's a Schnickelheimer or a Minert. His brother may have gone to Nebraska, and we found him there. That's why if you go to the Family History Library and look at these GIACR books, they're extremely well worn because people are looking for Texas Germans and their friends and family members, relatives in the books we've done. Shirley Reamer, in introducing me at the International Get-Together in Sacramento last year, said, GIACR will be Roger Minert's work of a lifetime. It will indeed, as long as the good Lord allows me to remain or become mentally and physically capable. So thanks very much for sharing your time with me today. I'll turn you back to our host.
Thank you, Roger. We'll now open it up for questions and answers. So if you have any questions for Dr. Minert, then please post it in the chat box and he can answer it for us. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for watching today. We'd like to invite you to view our next webinar on January 31st, Friday at 4 p.m. And that's going to be on immigration and naturalization with Susan Hoffman. And we look forward to that. Thank you all for viewing today, and we hope you have a great day.